just to prove I didn't do this to an empty room. That's okay. Awesome. Thanks very much. Cool.
We're all paid actors.
By the fruit and vegetable industry, of course. 1, 2. Okay. Cool. Thanks very much for coming, everybody. So let's make a start. My name is Thomas Anthony, and I'm really excited to be here. Although I must admit, I'm a bit nervous because as a vegan, I was worried about not having enough energy to stand up here and speak to you all. But then I remembered that's the biggest load of shit that I've ever heard, so I think I'm good to go. When I was a boy, our family welcomed a new member into our home. A black Labrador puppy with a white spot nestled right in the centre of his chest. We named him George, and from the moment he wagged his tail and licked my face, I knew he was meant to be part of our lives. George was a bundle of joy, his fur as soft as a cloud. His eyes held a universe of curiosity, and his paws danced across the floor like a tiny, furry pianist. His innocence was a balm for our hearts, a reminder of the goodness in life. Every morning, George would greet us with boundless enthusiasm. His tail would thump against the floor, he'd nuzzle our hands, urging us to play fetch or go for walks. And oh, those walks. I remember my first walk. I didn't realise how strong he was, but he literally lifted me off my feet as he took off and dragged me through the mud. George would always lead the way, his nose sniffing out every scent, the earth, the grass, the distant promise of adventure. As the seasons changed, so did George. He grew from a curious puppy into a loyal companion. His eyes held wisdom through his years, as if he understood the world's secrets. When I was sad, he'd rest his head on my lap, his warm gaze saying, "It's okay, I'm here." And somehow it was enough. George taught me about empathy. He felt joy when we laughed, and sensed our pain when tears fell. His love was unconditional, unfiltered by judgments or expectations. He didn't care about our flaws. He loved us simply because we existed. And that's when it hits me, the profound truth that all animals are subjects of their own lives. George valued his existence, his tail wagging, his eyes shining. Those were expressions of his inner world, his unique experience of being alive. And then one day, we had to let him go into the great beyond, into the light that he brought into our lives every single day. And in letting him go, we honoured his journey and the sacredness of his life. And in the quiet that followed, I felt his presence, not as a void, but as a warm glow within my heart. A reminder that love never truly leaves us. It simply transforms, becoming the light that guides us forward. And if you don't already know, I'm a passionate advocate for the rights of all animals. Because if George deserved the right to life and liberty, respect, dignity, and protection from harm, then why not others? My old English teacher from school and former lover, scratch that, that was just a dream that I had. She told me one time, self-preservation is the strongest instinct. I've witnessed so many animals trying to free themselves, trying to escape slaughterhouses, trying to evade their captors, desperately striving to keep on living because their lives matter to them, just as much as mine does to me, just as much as George's did to him. So I vowed to be an advocate for animals, to speak for them, to fight for their right to live without human-imposed suffering, exploitation, or indifference to these things. George wasn't just a family pet. He was a family member, a person of another species, with dreams, fears, and a heart that beat in sync with ours. And that's why, even now, when I see a wagging tail or a contented purr, or I hear a contented purr, because you can't see a purr, I remember him, his innocence, his love, and the lesson he etched into my soul. All animals deserve rights, for they are subjects of their own beautiful, irreplaceable lives. Now, the fact is that most people don't believe in animal rights. and my perspective on animal rights can be distilled into a few lines. Animals have an inherent right to life simply by virtue of their existence. This right isn't something that we bestow upon them. They possess life, therefore they have the right to it. Their lives matter to them, so it shouldn't be anyone else's to take. It's fundamentally wrong for humans to believe we can strip animals of their right to live with liberty and instead use them against their will, exploit them for their flesh, their milk, their eggs, their skin, and so on, and treat them as mere objects. Instead, we should recognise that animals exist for their own reasons and deserve respect, much like people of another species. That's the simplest way I can sum up how I feel about animals and why they are deserving of rights. And I hope Roger Yates can approve of that, and if not, I'm sorry Roger, let me know where I've went wrong. If you know, you know. Now, I wasn't born vegan, but through this talk I want to empower you to question your long-held beliefs about the use and exploitation of animals that we share this planet with. My goal is to stimulate critical thought so that you can consider the impacts of cultural conditioning and make more informed choices. This speech is not about preaching or imposing a particular viewpoint on you. It's about facilitating greater dialogue beyond this room that encourages you to step outside of your comfort zones into new territory, to challenge what you've been told and taught since birth, and to consider how each one of us can forge a better pathway towards a more conscious, compassionate, and peaceful society. But let me ask you a question. Can anybody put their hand up in this room right now and say you were born with the belief that using, exploiting, and killing animals is okay? Can anyone put their hand up in this room right now and say you were born with any beliefs? The statement that no one is born with beliefs, and that beliefs are something we develop over time through socialization, is a widely accepted view among many psychologists, sociologists, and philosophers. Cognitive development and the influence of culture and the environment you grow up in when it comes to belief formation run parallel. A young person's mind is shaped through their experiences over time, to put it simply. We all get our beliefs from somewhere. If you're hearing this message today and you're not vegan, I want to tell you something. I want to tell you the truth. You have been conditioned to go against your good nature. You've been manipulated by very powerful companies since birth to do something that you think is harmless, but in fact is incredibly harmful. And so you've been fed a lot of lies. And how do I know this? Because I was too, and I've seen a lot of things that you probably haven't to back up what I'm saying. The significance of what I'm sharing here cannot be overstated. At this point in my life, I've been vegan just over 8 years, and I've been involved in doing activism the last 6 or so. I've protested outside slaughterhouses. I was part of an action called Meet the Victims that made it onto the news for exposing a local family-run pig farm where we documented animals cannibalising each other. I've marched for animals in different countries, I've led marches at times, I've protested in London for 2 weeks straight with what was a group known as Animal Rebellion, and now Animal Rising. I've spent years on the streets of Belfast alongside others, challenging the public and society's norms when it comes to animal use and exploitation. I've spoken to hundreds, if not thousands, of people at this point on this topic, and last year, by myself, I set up a screen in the city centre showing standard industry practice of a wide range of animal use and slaughter, with a sign attached that says, "Society lies and brainwashes you not to care." And I continue to do this often. I never expected to be doing any of this before I came across the meaning of veganism and the concept of animals deserving rights. I had a completely different idea of what I wanted to do in my life. Like many of you, I once held unquestioning views about this. I was oblivious to what was really happening, what I was really paying for. I was unaware of it until suddenly I wasn't. I had the privilege of encountering an individual who challenged my blindness, who gave me sight, who prodded and poked me to look beyond what society deemed normal, and most importantly, who educated me and showed me the reality that had deliberately been hidden from me my entire life up to that point. It was through this episode of revelation, discovering the horrific nature of animals having the right to life violated, seeing their exploitation, and with that, a deep well of empathy and compassion emerged within myself for others. Their suffering and the unrelenting drive to do something about such sickening injustice for those who could do nothing whatsoever to help themselves. My canines started to feel quite blunt at this point. Every instinct of the omnivore in me disappeared that day, and I actually bleed green now, which is all the time, because as a vegan, a strong wind, it'll just rip you right open. But seriously, I felt like I'd evolved. Suddenly, no longer paying for animals to be used and killed for me seemed like an incredible shift in my life, and I couldn't wait to tell everyone about it. And so I did, but that's another story. Now, how to learn ignorance and influence people. That's what I decided to call this talk. Because I believe we have all learned some degree of ignorance. We have all been taught to be ignorant over many generations, and with that, an immense influence in society has unfolded and is responsible for so much unconscious, unthinking behaviour that it needs to be brought to your attention. I would ask you to put your hands up if you appreciate that we as humans have the right to life and liberty, the right to freedom from slavery and torture and so on. But obviously everyone can appreciate such things. We know what wrong is when it's being done to us, not so much when it comes to animals though. What this talk is really about is how we, and when I say we, I mean most people, but how we have been made ignorant, and how it's taken root so deeply that suddenly when we take us as humans out of the picture and replace us with other animals, and I say they too should have the right to life and liberty, the right to freedom from slavery and torture. It's not the influence of a person's own heart or original nature of purity and innocence that they were born with that says, no, they shouldn't have rights. Let's do whatever we want with them and kill them instead. It's a person's conditioned mind that objects, and their social programming that kicks in and has you convinced that this is okay. In one way or another, if you're not vegan and you don't think that you should be, this, ladies and gentlemen, is the result of so many deliberate influences that have been designed to affect us since the day we were born to make us this way. All I ask is that you keep an open mind through this talk. Please think about what I'm saying. And what I mean by that is, hear what I've got to say and try not to fixate on your current beliefs and reasoning and assume for this talk maybe some of the beliefs you hold aren't correct. There's a lot of examples of things we thought we were right about and we were wrong. And I believe that a lot of you are going to hold beliefs, just like I did my whole life on this topic, that are wrong. And if you give me an open mind and hear another side of the story today, I think the people in here that do that are going to leave with a very different perspective on things. Now, here's why it's important to question our beliefs and where they come from. First and foremost, if you never question your beliefs, you can never change them. If you don't do this, they will always have power over you. And we would all like to be able to say, my beliefs empower me, not hold me back in life, right? We are actually born with infinite potential, but how many of us grow up with inferiority complexes or insecurities or just limiting beliefs in general because of others' throwaway comments and opinions we heard when we were younger? I know I've put in a ton of work on myself to get past some of this and to even be here talking to you today. If we are conscious enough to see it, we can recognize that we can let go of what no longer serves us and we can shape our lives for the better, and therefore the lives of others too. But how good of an idea do you have of the person that you think you are if you've never stopped to think deeply about the beliefs you hold? Because beliefs are like habits we have formed in our thinking. When something is said or heard or thought of over and over again for a period of time long enough, the mind finds a way to cement it and turn it to a belief. Especially if it's practiced as an action. A person is eating animals, they enjoy that, it's normal. Everyone else is too, it's acceptable, they aren't shown the truth. A person is eating animals, they enjoy that, it's normal, it's acceptable, and they aren't shown the truth. Our brain is incredible and it wants to simplify our life by making our thoughts and actions automatic. And so once that becomes a mental habit and then a behaviour, it requires little to no conscious effort to think about anymore. And this starts off when we're very young, impressionable children. But this can be a blessing or a curse, depending on the nature of our thoughts and what we're exposed to and taught. Rarely do we stop to reflect inward and to ponder the roots of where the dominant perspectives we hold come from in the first place. Like this idea that using, abusing, killing and eating animals is okay. A spiritual teacher and author, Jack Cornfield, once remarked, "In the absence of conscious awareness, we unwittingly become actors in the play of our conditioning." Really, it is true. Without intentional mindfulness, we do simply act out patterns ingrained in us, unaware of the script that we're following. And where does that script come from? Well, quite often what we think of as our own individual beliefs, they are actually, for many of these, the same beliefs as those who were around us when we were younger. So they're not actually ours. Most people grew up eating and using animals because most people grew up eating and using animals. Think about it. Almost everyone has the same religion as their parents, and it's always from their perspective, the right one, and everyone else's religion is wrong. Now that just isn't a coincidence. It's the power of influence. And it kind of makes sense, and when you look at the research on the subject, for example that of Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget, who is known for his pioneering work in the field of child development and cognitive psychology, it strongly suggests that children do adopt the beliefs of their parents. One of Piaget's key studies involved interviewing children about moral and social issues. For instance, he might have asked, 1. Is it okay to take something without asking? Why do you think lying is wrong? Should everyone share their toys? What happens when someone breaks a rule? And why aren't you vegan yet? I'm only joking about that last one, but seriously, why aren't you vegan yet? And of course, the answers to these questions reflected the beliefs and values of the parents, clearly illustrating how parental influence shapes early cognitive development. But I'm not saying that we all turn out to believe the exact same things as those before us and around us, though I am saying the whole time when we were developing, we were exposed to a lot of influences from others, their beliefs, their behaviours, their culture, their values, their habits, none of which was ever ours, none of which we had a say in the matter of. You didn't get to decide what you were going to be affected by when you were at your most impressionable. You didn't get to control what way that shaped your behaviours and thought patterns. It was imposed upon you without your ability to exercise rational thought and critical reasoning. Obviously, with the questions from the aforementioned study, particularly that last one, we all know the right answers, and these are good things to impart into the minds of children. But unfortunately, that's not all that gets in their little heads. Too often kids grow up with the wrong ideas, and we've all seen cases of this in our lives. And I'm here to tell you what we've been conditioned to believe towards animals is wrong. Because in a world that has long been engaged in the use, exploitation, abuse and deliberate killing of animals, there is so much influence on the minds of children and the collective psyche of humanity that it's difficult for most people to be able to even comprehend living life without any animal use at all. Yet every time I speak to someone about this issue, I ask, are you against animal abuse? And the answer is always a yes. Everyone seems to know that no animal wants to be born just to become someone's property, to be violated, abused terribly in the process, and killed. But it's also very clear to me that this too then seems to be so hard for people to understand. I'm not sure if I am to conclude that people are counting on their misunderstanding to protect them from any true realization. The amount of people I've spoken to that just can't see past their conditioning, that can't see themselves without using and depending on animal abuse. To me, that only strengthens my point here, that if I'm trying to free someone's awareness from their conditioned mind for 1 minute, and the box that's been built up around them since birth, they can't see past. The industries, of which there are many, have done an exceptional job in producing the ideal consumer in our society. One that doesn't think too deeply or peel the curtains back too much, who just accepts most of what they've been told, who does what everyone else does, and thinks nothing of it. And most significantly, who will defend this position as if it is their own. What a great illusion. What a great magic trick. So let's unpack all of this then. How exactly do people learn ignorance, and how does that ignorance influence their lives? Well, let me be clear with what I mean when I say ignorance. Little cliffhanger there. Ignorance, as I define it in this context, for me as an animal advocate, it's the unawareness of the reality of what happens to animals. The unawareness of the reality of what happens to animals. And it's this ignorance that allows you to pay for what you do. And no one was more ignorant than me, because if you can learn awareness of such things like all vegans have, you can also learn unawareness. I had literally never known of veganism until the day it came into my life. I'd never ever thought once about the living animals who were violated, what they went through for me before I came across veganism. If that isn't the definition of learned ignorance, I don't know what is. I'm talking about the choice that was made to deliberately mislead, misinform and miseducate us all. This is something that we all have in common, something we have all become victims of, and something we need to come together on. Me as a vegan, I'm not your enemy if you're not vegan, and I don't see you as my enemy. I just want to help people understand. Let me give you an example. So who here that isn't vegan is aware that as standard legal practice, farmers are allowed to kill underweight or sick piglets by grabbing them by their back legs and smashing their heads onto concrete? There we go. Learned unawareness. Learned ignorance. And believe me, if you didn't know that, you have no idea how sick and disgusting what happens behind closed doors is, and what you're really paying for every day. And this unawareness comes to fruition from many things. So we have the influence of caregivers and guardians who already had their own lifetime of social conditioning and brainwashing to pass on to us. That's the most immediate influence. And that isn't me having a go at my parents when I talk about brainwashing, by the way. I just mean objectively the fact that people have been deliberately misled to believe things that are harmful and untrue, and they've passed them on to us. Like what happens to animals is necessary. It's simply not true. I love my parents, by the way, and they've always done their best for me, but I will not shy away from the fact that what was passed on to them regarding animals was passed on to me too, and that it's wrong. So our parents and caregivers are feeding us dead animals and stolen bodily secretions each and every day of our developing lives. We have no idea what it is, who that was, where they came from, how it's made, who got hurt and killed for it, from the very start, which is understandable at stages of early infancy and so forth. But often this can be the blueprint for a lot of people for the rest of their lives, never questioning anything about it because it's deliberately kept out of sight and out of mind, and most people aren't educated on it. Most people don't know that baby male chicks, because they are male and will never lay eggs, will never make the egg industry money. And so on their first day of life, as standard industry practice, they're either suffocated to death, drowned, or put on a conveyor belt and dropped into a shredder. Again, you have no idea. And even when I try to show most adults what happens, they don't want to watch. What does that tell you about how accepting of the reality of what they pay for they really are? The word denial comes to mind. There's a notion within the animal rights movement that if everything was okay on the farm and in slaughterhouses and so forth, then it wouldn't be vegan activists showing the brutal reality of what happens. It would be the farmers themselves. But obviously that isn't good for business, because they know it's ugly and horrible and bloody and violent, and that these animals struggle for freedom, though few ever experience it. It wouldn't really be a great advertisement showing an animal in distress trying desperately to escape slaughter while marketing their cut up corpses, would it? Anyway, we acquire a taste for what we're fed as youngsters, never seeing the process. Same for most of our parents, and if it tastes good, this obviously creates a bias and a desire to want it again. We're eating the same as those around us at home, and there's a unity, a collective embracing of the food. Many families give thanks as if receiving a gift, when in reality the animals never give their lives willingly. But over and over and over again, the same foods are consumed, the days turn to years, and a person has had decades of practicing something, oblivious to the truth behind it all, convinced there's nothing wrong with it because it's never been questioned. For the longest time, on the surface, it seems pretty normal. It's socially acceptable by the majority. It's so intricately woven into the fabric of everyone's reality that it can seem so foreign, like something what people are eating, as well as the other byproducts of animal use and exploitation, that these things could be conceived as one of the worst moral atrocities of our time. But it is actually the case. And I said what, but it's about who. It's about these virtually invisible victims that you don't see. These are individuals with stories that you don't know, stories that are terrible and that don't end well because of you if you're not vegan. In human history, around 108 billion people have ever lived. 8 billion people are alive today. We torture and kill 2 billion land animals every week and stab and suffocate 1 billion ocean animals every 8 hours. If humans were killed at the same rate, we'd be wiped out in a weekend. Next, we have the influence of those outside the home, neighbours, extended family, friends, those in the wider community. It is said that other people are like mirrors, reflecting back who we are to us, and we do the same for them. When we communicate, there is a transmission taking place. We learn something of who we are from shared interactions, so there is a reinforcing of behaviours. You see someone with some groceries involving animal products, or someone eating food also containing dead animals. It's subtle, it's subconscious, but all those little things throughout your life, going to the shop for your mother to buy eggs and so on, all those happy meals you had as a child without seeing the unhappy animals being killed. You see a nice old lady coming out of the butcher's with her corpse cuts. All these things reinforce the idea that from a very young age what we do to animals is okay, yet isn't something to think about, just accept. As social creatures, humans are hardwired to seek group harmony. We all have a fundamental need to connect with others. From an evolutionary perspective, consider the survival benefits of cooperation and community. But not only that, neuroscientific research suggests that our brain is inherently social, with specific neural networks dedicated to understanding and navigating social interactions. And of course, we have the famous studies by Solomon Asch from the 50s that demonstrate the powerful influence of social conformity. Just going to leave you on another cliffhanger there. It's a really interesting study though, this one. Alright. Subjects were given lengths to compare and to record which they thought were the same. Some lines were the exact same, some were longer, some were shorter. It took place in a group setting, with only one person in each group being a genuine test subject, and those deliberately participating to facilitate the study intentionally given wrong answers. Many genuine participants conformed to the group consensus that the lines were the same length despite knowing the lines were a different length. So social conformity is obviously quite a compelling force if even when individuals know something contradicts their own judgment, they can still be willing to yield to group opinions to just do what everyone else is doing. And we can logically conclude from this then that social conformity is even more powerful still when individuals don't know something is wrong, but everyone else is doing that thing and there's only ever the opportunity to participate too. I mean, is anyone here any childhood memories of being invited to a completely vegan get-together? Didn't think so. Be awkward if someone said yeah. So when it comes to the use and exploitation of animals in society, obviously the norm is unquestioning acceptance and an embracing of the byproducts of their slaughter. And after the immediate influences of the family and the surrounding community, when the children are of age, they go to school. A place where their still sponge-like minds go to learn. Think about some of the earliest nursery rhymes and how they're intimately blended with melody and picturesque scenes of animal use and exploitation. Old MacDonald had a farm. He had a cow, a pig, a duck, a sheep, chickens and a horse. He had them, meaning they were his property. It never tells you what he had them for or what happened to them. In reality, animal farmers breed and keep hundreds, more often thousands of animals together, and they're responsible for exploiting the bodies of these animals as much as they can possibly get away with without killing them too soon, and without one single drop of compassion for how much suffering this causes along the way, because when it comes to the well-being of the animals or the money to be made, you know the farmers are putting the money first. And then obviously they're also responsible for forcing those animals onto trucks to be driven to their brutal deaths. But this wouldn't happen if people didn't pay for it. This is just scratching the surface, but other examples in the same vein. Children's books, cartoons and movies frequently give animals human-like qualities, and while entertaining, this can blur the lines between animals' natural behaviours and the human desire to see them as we want to. Animal-themed toys are also ubiquitous in childhood. I'm sure every one of you had one or more. And I'm pretty sure I had a fluffy dolphin and Simba from The Lion King. These toys reinforce the idea that animals exist for our use. Animal characters, for example, on kids' lunchboxes, backpacks and clothing further ingrain these associations too. Animal-related holidays and traditions like Easter with the Easter Bunny, we're out. Easter with the Easter Bunny and Christmas with the reindeers perpetuate the idea of animals serving specific roles to humans. Many children ride ponies, go to zoos, buy pet animals from breeders and pet shops. I myself had many hamsters, and these experiences create connections between children and animals in controlled environments that play on the good nature of children wanting to care for and love animals, but again reinforce that same idea that animals are here for us and exist for our use. Also in our language, there are so many sayings. Can anyone think of an example of our use of language that degrades animals? Phrases, yeah, go ahead.
More than one way to skin a cat.
Yes, man, yeah. Anyone else on more than one way to skin a cat?
Kill two birds with one stone.
Kill two birds with one stone. Go on once.
Just insulting people by calling them different animal names.
Yeah, for sure. Run around like a headless chicken. There's more than one way to skin a cat. Killing two birds with one stone. Feeding time at the zoo. And the most disrespectful of all, in my opinion, treated like animals. All these things together subtly reinforce the idea that the lives of animals are unworthy of moral consideration. Now, when it comes to school, I agree with Mark Twain. I've never let my schooling interfere with my education. I'm certainly not anti-education, but I don't remember ever being taught about how a way of living free from animal use and exploitation was possible. I do remember in primary school farmer folks coming to class giving out stolen cow's milk meant for calves, telling us we needed to drink it for strong bones, and in science being told the flesh of murdered animals was where we get our protein from, though not in those words. I'm sure you can recall to mind the food pyramid, but never in any of the classes was it ever even hinted at that I could eat healthy and nutritionally adequately without eating something from an animal. The influence of teachers, many of which seem like legitimate authority figures, can be quite convincing to young minds who don't know otherwise. These things may be changing in terms of what children are informed of in schools. I'm just highlighting how for the longest of times, the education surrounding the truth of how everyone can live without needless rights violations and killing of animals was non-existent. Education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. Nelson Mandela. Education is learned ignorance. Ramana Maharshi. None but ourselves can free our minds. Bob Marley. And so we have to learn the extent of our own ignorance. I hope you're starting to see how this ignorance towards animals is learned. All throughout our life, think about how many advertisements you've ever been exposed to. Before the internet, there were still radio, television, newspapers, and advertisements plastered everywhere. Now we see adverts even more through our devices. I'd say in the average day, a person has got to be exposed to around 5 to 10, maybe more. For me, at the tender age of 32, that's 11,680 days roughly. And in terms of adverts throughout those days, that's 58 to 116,000. Consider how many of these are trying to get you to pay for animal rights violations. I guarantee you, if you leave this building and go 100 meters in any direction, you will see adverts showcasing the dressed up corpse cuts of animals. So do not think for one second that you have escaped the influence of marketers, advertising firms, and the branch of psychology devoted to this, known as public relations. It's really an art and science of influencing the behaviour of the masses. And people say vegans force their views on us, when really the opposite has been pushed onto us all since birth. One of the founding fathers of public relations, Edward Bernays, who was a nephew of Sigmund Freud, used his uncle's insights into the subconscious mind to create powerful campaigns that appealed to the emotions and desires of the public. He literally wrote a book in the 1920s called Propaganda. And he once said, "The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organised habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country." Those who have sold us the lie of needing to exploit, use and kill animals our whole lives thrive off this stuff. It's how they continue to do what they do. I saw a headline recently that said, "Inside the pork industry's attempts to charm and influence academia." And the subheading read, "Documents reveal a proposal to train PhDs on how to boost public trust in pork." There's so much money that goes into this stuff. This isn't about the past long ago where it was kill or be killed and our primitive ancestors doing what they had to survive. This is the 21st century where you can get a free education on anything within seconds on your smartphone. There are very intelligent, money-hungry people who will happily pay the price of deceiving everybody to line their own pockets, while trillions and trillions of innocent animals suffer and die every year for no good reason. They don't think you're smart enough to see through the bullshit, and to be honest, they have you right where they want you. Their reach is so great that it extends into the very fabric of political decision-making, government agendas. They fund biased research in the scientific community to deliberately create misinformation. In some countries, they create gag laws against speaking out and exposing the truth, often leading to jail time for activists. And they've even had activists killed for going against them. These are very, very powerful industries. So you have the individual, a blank slate at birth, born not wanting to harm animals, conditioned into believing it's okay and necessary. We grew up in a fine-tuned society that is designed to mould the mind and produce specific behavioural outcomes without question. A lot of that is programmed into us since birth, before we're consciously aware of what's really happening, which undoubtedly goes a very long way to establish in large part the belief system that we end up with in later life as an adult, which is incredibly problematic, not just for the human animal, but for so many others too, and much more so for them. I think that was the longest sentence I've ever said in my life. Has anyone ever heard of the Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness? It's a document issued in 2012 by a group of prominent scientists that asserts that humans, as well as animals, are indeed conscious with their own experiences and emotions. Funny they didn't include plants. It states there is strong, irrefutable scientific evidence that animals are sentient, meaning they experience themselves as individuals like we do. They too are subjects of a life they recognise as their own. And they too, like us, experience pain, pleasure, fear and joy, love and so forth. This obviously challenges the traditional view that consciousness is exclusive to humans. And if we actually think about the ethical implications of recognising the consciousness of other animals, if we were to do that and actually consider the harm our often unthinking actions cause other living creatures, this is how we could become a better and more conscious and more compassionate society. I know as we go about our daily lives, it's easy to rush through our days and become so consumed by our own concerns and desires. But let me ask you this. Have you ever really stopped to consider the harm we cause to others when they aren't even a blip on our radar? Or do you simply just accept this as the cost of modern life? Because it doesn't have to be this way. You do have the power to make a change, to embrace animal rights, to not see them as property, as things, to not think you have more right to their body than they do, to choose peace over pieces of their dead bodies, to consider the consequences of your actions and choose a path of the animal ally, not the enemy. You can choose to live in harmony with animals and recognise what they already do, that their lives are worth something more to them than their dead remains are to you. And to understand that as you want to be treated with the respect and dignity you feel that you deserve, it's total hypocrisy not to grant this to others. Have you ever considered that the alternatives to using and exploiting animals are right here, right now? Alternatives that not only respect the animal's right to life and liberty, but benefit us also. There are delicious and nutritious plant-based alternatives that can satisfy your cravings. We no longer need to rely on animal testing for cosmetics and pharmaceuticals. Scientific advancements have been made through innovative and cruelty-free methods without the torture of innocent creatures in labs. And what about entertainment and fashion? Is it truly necessary to confine animals in cages and prisons we like to call zoos, subjecting them to confinement for our amusement and voyeurism? Is it truly necessary to murder animals for a pair of shoes, a coat, a handbag, or a rug? Is this really how little you value the lives of other animals? Because I don't think that it is. Imagine a world where we find joy and beauty in activities that don't involve these things, and with fashion that doesn't come at the expense of other living creatures. The alternatives are right here, all around you. We have the power to make choices that respect the undeniable worth and right to life of as many animals as possible. Let us challenge ourselves to think critically about the way we interact with the world around us, and from this day forward, make choices that reflect our human decency, intelligence, and empathy. Because in the words of Socrates, the unexamined life is not worth living. So I urge you in the name of good conscience to examine your actions and to strive to make choices that benefit not only the animals with whom we share this planet with, but yourselves also. You'll likely live longer. It's kinder to the earth and all the animals in the wild. And so you have to ask yourself, what kind of world do you want to live in? A world where humans continue to turn a blind eye to the suffering of animals who are only suffering in the first place because of humans? Or a world where we strive to make a difference, to create a future where as many living creatures as possible can coexist? This isn't a pipe dream. The choice is yours. Veganism, which is the best we can do for animals, or a world of hell and violence for innocent creatures for no good reason. We all have the power together to make it work, but only together. I'm here to stand up for those who cannot be here today, who cannot speak for themselves, who are being violated right this very second, and who need you right now to work towards a world where compassion and empathy and justice are the guiding principles of all our actions. Here is the perspective of these voiceless victims, unable to advocate for themselves, lives reduced to mere commodities, forced to endure torment, no bodily autonomy, classed as someone else's property, no right to their own life, no liberty, each one torn from their families and ultimately slaughtered for reasons that are frivolous and unjustifiable. It is time for you to confront the harsh reality of your actions and recognize the immense suffering you inflict upon our fellow earthlings. Confining, depriving, mutilating, torturing, shooting, stabbing, electrocuting, gassing, shredding, punching, kicking, hammering, mocking. It goes on and on. These things are not civilized, they're not humane, and they certainly aren't peaceful. You cannot continue to ignore the animals forever, nor can you justify their exploitation with flimsy excuses and rationalizations, because I've heard it all. I've seen people get this in a heartbeat, and I've stood with people for hours as they try to defend unnecessary violence and killing. A person is either ready for truth, to evolve into a greater version of themselves that respects the rights of others, or they are blind to their own ignorance and determined to defend it at all costs. Imagine a world where veganism is the norm, and children grow up understanding that we have abundant, delicious plant-based options, and animals are seen as the wonderful individuals that they are, and have the right to life and liberty. And then some people come along and want to cause suffering and violence to animals, make money out of doing it, and they want to start their own families and teach the same to their kids too. Given the choice, I'm confident that most children would likely opt for a vegan lifestyle. I want to show you a short video that perfectly ties in with this talk, and then I'll come back and close it off. You might have seen this before, but it's quite good.
انت اسمك ايه؟
حبيبة
رحيم
10 سنين.
12.
هل احنا بناكل عشان نعيش ولا بنعيش عشان ناكل؟
ناكل عشان نعيش.
بتحب الحيوانات؟ ايه اكتر حيوان بتحبه؟
كلب.
تعرف تقلد صوته؟
اه.
ايه اكتر اكلة تحبيها؟
فراخ والمكرونة.
برجر.
احنا هنوريكي صور اعلانات سندوتشات وتقول لنا ايه رايك فيها.
كلهم حلوين. فراخ
فراخ ايه؟
محمرة.
لو انت في الصحراء ومعاك الكلب بتاعك، لو انت جوعت يعني ممكن تذبح الكلب وتاكله؟
لا،
لا.
ليه؟
عشان دي روح زيه.
لو انت معاكي فرخه صاحبتك وفجاه جوعتي، هل هتاكلي الفرخه صاحبتك؟
هاكلها.
ايه اللي يحصل لو ما اكلناش لحمه؟ هل هنموت؟
لا.
هنعمل دلوقتي لعبه، هنجيب لك متر، المتر ده بيقيس قد ايه انت بتاكلي لحمه وقد ايه انت بتاكلي نباتات. انا لو باكل لحمه مره في الاسبوع هبقى الرقم 2 أو 1. لو باكل لحمه كل يوم وفراخ هبقى رقم 10. على اللوحه اللي قصادك كده لو في اسد تفتكر هو بياكل لحمه قد ايه؟ ولو افتكري الارنب بياكل لحمه قد ايه؟ دلوقتي احنا معانا اصدقاء جايبينهم معانا في البرنامج. عارفه ايه دول؟
كتاكيت.
طب لو تسميهم تسمي الكتاكيت دي ايه؟
بندق، وده شيبوب، وده ماكس.
شيبوب وزبيبة وسويدة.
وهيبقوا ايه لما يكبروا؟
فراخ
ايه دي يا حبيبه؟
فراخ
مجمدة.
تعرف الفرخه بتعيش قد ايه يا رحيم؟
سنة.
تعرف الفرخه اللي انت بتاكليها في البيت عندها قد ايه؟ من 2 ل3 شهور. تعرفي كده؟
لا مش بعرف.
يعني انت شايفه ان الكتاكيت دي المفروض نعملهم برفق ولا نعملهم بقسوه؟
برفق.
يعني ازاي وصلت للكيس ده؟
لما اتذبحت.
بعدها نضفوها، بعدها حطوها في الفريزر.
الكيس ده عليه ايه؟
فرخة.
عامله ازاي؟
فرخة لابسة مريالة وماسكة شوكة كبيرة.
وبتضحك ولا زعلانه؟
بتضحك.
طيب وهي تفتكري ليه هم حاطين فرخه بتضحك على الكيس؟
عشان نحب ناكلها.
يعني هم بيضحكوا عليكي؟
مم.
طب تفتكري الفرخه اللي في الكيس دي فرحانه ولا زعلانه؟
زعلانة
ليه؟
عشان اتذبحت.
انت لو دوست على رجل فرخه هتتوجع ولا لا؟
تتقطع.
طب والسكينه هتوجع لها رقبتها ولا لا؟
اه.
طب وتفتكري هي في حد بيبقى مبسوط وهو بيموت؟
لا.
نعمل سندوتش تشيكن برجر. ايه دي بقى اللي قصادك؟
عيش وخس وجبنة.
طب ناقص ايه؟
فراخ.
يلا اعمل السندوتش.
لا،
بس دي حية.
عشان مش مذبوحة.
امسك.
ليه؟
اذبحها.
حرام.
هتمسكي راسها ترفعيها لفوق وتروحي قاطعه لها رقبتها كده.
لا مش هقدر.
ليه؟
لا.
ليه؟
كده.
لا.
اما انت لما تذبحها هي هتموت. دلوقتي يا عم عامر احنا عايزين نعمل سندوتش الشيكن برجر، ممكن تذبح لنا الفرخه دي؟ سيبها يا عم، سيبها يا عم معلش خالص. سيبها خالص يا عم. طب ما تقول لنا انت بتعيط ليه؟ ايه اللي يخليك تعيط؟ ها يا رحيم؟
مش شايف روح قدامي بتموت.
طب يا حبيبي ما احنا بناكل لحمه وفراخ كده، ما هناكلها ازاي؟ ما انت عشان تاكلها لازم تموتها. خلاص يا حبيبي احنا خلصنا. عايزة تقولي حاجة؟ ماشي خلاص يا رحيم تعالى خلاص ما تزعلش.
We were all like these kids once, innocent and pure in our ways and how we thought about life. As adults, you might think you know better, and maybe for some things that is true, but not when it comes to right and wrong. Young, innocent kids aren't trying to justify something terribly wrong because of another motive to enjoy someone's dead body. These kids had no agenda, only an honest response from the heart. I believe that is what we need to come back to, because in the end only three things matter: how well we have lived, how well we have loved, and how well we have learned to let go of things that no longer serves us. It's all in the choices that you make every day. They will either force animals to have their rights violated or save others from being bred into an existence you wouldn't wish on anyone. Think about which one of those serves you better and aligns with who you are truly inside, not the illusion of the person that you think you are. If your understanding of right and wrong does not include animals at this point, it's incomplete. I've came here today to free your mind from ignorance and have tried to wake you up to reality. If you consider yourself a critical thinker, a free thinker, a truth seeker, open-minded at all, a compassionate human being, a conscious individual, even a half-decent person, striving to live and let live, if you're not yet vegan, are you not directly contributing to the demand for more animals to be bred into existence, only to be violated and unnecessarily killed for you? But right now you have a choice. Everyone says that they want to live in a better world. Words without actions are just words, and they mean little in the real world. You can choose to go along with the ignorance that you already learned, and the influence of that you already know. Only accept now, your ignorance isn't so ignorant anymore. You're aware of it. Or you can choose to educate yourselves about the realities of animal exploitation, from the horrors of farming to the brutality of animal testing. I say arm yourselves with knowledge and understanding, for it's through awareness first that we can effect change. There's a free documentary you can watch on YouTube called Dominion, and if you're not vegan, you need to see it. Take action in your daily lives. Choose vegan foods over animal exploitation. Stop wearing animal skin or anything made from animals. Opt for products not tested on animals. Don't pay money to exploit animals for any reason, and support organisations and initiatives that advocate for animals to have rights. Me personally, I will always be on the side of those who have nothing and who aren't even allowed to enjoy the nothing that they have in peace. What I believe is fundamentally special about humans is our ability to love, our ability to reach out and to help the vulnerable others. Animals are very vulnerable in this often ruthless world. They are the world's most forgotten victims, and their lives matter to them regardless if they don't matter to someone else. And nothing anyone can say to me will ever change that. This is a new day. It doesn't have to be the same as all that have passed before it. You can all change your ways, and in doing so, you can change the world. So let us stand up for those who cannot speak for themselves, get active, and work towards a future where animals have the right to life and liberty and to be treated with dignity and respect. Thank you.